Okay, welcome to tonight's Design Review Commission for Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Krelling.
Here.
Commissioner Gorney.
Here.
Commissioner Valia.
Here.
Vice Chair Gates.
Here.
And Chair Killian.
Good night here.
Okay.
Okay, pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, City Commissioners may participate via teleconference. Teleconference locations are not open to the public pursuant to California Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. If the public would like to participate in tonight's meeting, from a Mac, PC, iPad device, the webinar ID is 969-0171-9122, and the login password is 478525. If you'd like to join us by phone, the number is 1-669-900-6833. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item number 2, which is the consent calendar, and we have nothing on the consent calendar.
That's correct.
So item number 3, we'll move on, which is public communication. And this is the portion of the meeting where if anybody in the audience would like to make a comment on an issue that's not on tonight's agenda.
So we'll wait just a second as there is a delay. Okay, we see no one chiming in, so we can move on.
Okay, we'll close the public communication and we'll move on to public hearing. Tonight we have 3 items. The first item is 4A Byron Park Residential Care Facility, the 1-year extension. And I will be recusing myself. I have a conflict of interest on that particular project. So I guess Casey, you can take over for 4A.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. You know, we were hoping to move item 4A onto the consent calendar, if that works for everyone. I might also suggest that we could also consider moving item 4B onto the consent calendar, if that's okay. But we can poll the commissioners on that.
I'm okay with the first item going on, but it's sad because Jessica put so much time into this PowerPoint presentation. I hate to put it to waste, but I'm all right putting the second item on consent also.
I am as well.
Do we know if there is anyone from the public that came for the second item, the Mockingbird Hill?
Yeah, if we can, we can certainly ask if they raise their electronic hand. We can certainly poll the public if anyone would like to remove any of those from the consent calendar for discussion. That's fine. What we do need to do first, though, is move them both onto the consent calendar and then ask if the public would like to remove those.
Okay, I didn't hear any objections. So with that, let's move item 4A, the Byron Park Residential Care Facility, and item B, which is the Narlock Swimming Pool and Pool Pavilion, to the consent calendar. Do we need a motion on that or a
We need to ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to pull either of those items off the consent calendar for discussion.
It looks like Lisa Narlock is here for Mockingbird Hill. She texted all of us on the webinar chat.
Okay, good. Chip, can you move her in, please?
Is she against the project?
I think she's the owner.
I know.
Okay. I got it. Delayed reaction. That's Zoom's fault.
All right, we finally brought you up to speed, Charles.
It's about time.
Hi, sorry about that. I'm Lisa Narlock. I'm actually the property owner along my husband, Joe Narlock, should be zooming in also. And I know Jessica had set up the meeting along with Jeff Jones.
Lisa, this is Brian Killian. Do you have any objections if it's on the consent calendar?
No.
Okay, great. All right, Ken, did we have any other inquiries from the public?
No, there's nothing.
Okay, let's put them on the consent calendar. So let's vote. I'm going to split it up in two because again, I will not be voting on the first one. So I guess, Ken, if you could go for the roll call for 4A, the Byron Park Residential Care Facility.
Let's see if we can get a motion for item 4A and a second.
I'll make a motion to approve 4A on consent.
I will.
I heard Carlos on that one, so let's do that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Gorney,
Yes.
Commissioner Valia,
Yes.
Commissioner Krelling,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Case.
Yes.
All right, motion carries with Chair Killian abstaining or recusing from that one. Now we need a motion and a second for 4B, item 4B, Narlock.
I'll make a motion that we approve this with the conditions as stated in the staff report.
I'll second it.
All right,
First.
motion and a second. I'll call the roll. Chair Killian,
Yes.
Commissioner Krelling,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorney,
Yes.
Commissioner Valia,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Case.
Yes.
All right, motion carries unanimously.
Okay, let's move on to item number 4C, which is the Skyline Sign Master Sign Program. And do we have a staff report?
All right, thank you, commissioners. My name is Haley Crawford, Associate Planner here with the City of Walnut Creek. And tonight I will be presenting the Skyline Sign Master Sign Program and Sign Ordinance Exceptions Project. This is application Y20-040. The project is comprised of 4 unique office complex located in Walnut Creek, California Plaza, Mount Diablo Plaza, Walnut Creek Center, and the Ignacio Center, all shown on this map here. And the project scope is for a combined master sign program for all 4 sites that would allow for the installation of skyline signs that would be visible from the adjacent 680 freeway and the BART station and tracks. I'll just note that the master sign program before you tonight would not replace any existing individual master sign programs. And the project before you does require 3 sign ordinance exceptions. 1 to install a sign higher than 25 feet above grade. A second one to allow signage for businesses that do not have frontage on the ground floor. And then a third one to allow businesses to exceed 200 square feet of total aggregate sign area. So this project was previously before the DRC back in September for a study session where you provided comments to the applicant and to staff. In general, the DRC was supportive of the concept, did note that the application before you would be precedent setting for the City of Walnut Creek, focused a little bit on the site's unique features that would allow for skyline signs. Did request some additional plan details from the applicant and then some discussion and concern with the proposed illumination, specifically face-lit letters, and some discussion and concern about a skyline sign on the north stairwell of Mount Diablo Plaza. So the applicant took your comments and made the revisions to the plans, which are before you tonight, and I will be going through the scope in general, but focusing on some of the changes since the last time the DRC saw this. Just to highlight some unique features of the sites that that was emphasized at the last study session. So all of 4 sites before you tonight they're unique in that they have proximity and visibility from 680 and the Walnut Creek BART station. They are adjacent to freeway exits in that the skyline signs would enable wayfinding. They are all located north of Ignacio Valley Road and also therefore north of the pedestrian-oriented downtown area. They all have tall multi-story buildings with horizontal fascia bands that would allow for signage that would be architecturally compatible with the buildings. And just a kind of refresh of the general regulations of the skyline signs. Only one skyline sign, or UW, upper wall, as they're called out in the sign program, would be allowed per building elevation, with a maximum of 1 to 3 per building, depending on the building. And any business could be permitted up a skyline sign, and any business could be allowed multiple signs. And the signs themselves would be made of individual channel letters. Currently, the proposal is for 48-inch maximum letter heights, or 85% of the fascia height, and 54-inch max logo heights, or 90%, whichever is less. The signs could be halo lit, internally face lit, or non-illuminated, and the maximum sign area for each sign is 200 square feet. As requested by the DRC, the applicant has included the fascia band heights for every potential sign location. As you'll see as we flip through, there are locations where the 85% letter height is actually less. And so the max letter heights would be lower than 48 inches, and the logo heights would actually be lower or smaller than 54 inches. And so we'll highlight those as we go along, but I want to draw your attention to that specifically because staff feels that in these locations, these signs do look tight on the fascia band. And so we are recommending, instead of 85% of the fascia height, 75% of the fascia height, to give a little bit more kind of breathing room, for lack of a better term, for the sign to have a nice border around it and sit better architecturally. Illumination was also a topic that we discussed in length at the study session. The applicant is still proposing face-lit letters, but has taken your comments and has added some additional regulations in the sign program. And I want to say that at the time that the applicant submitted the plans and at the time that I submitted the staff report, they were considering and doing research on controlling the illumination level of the signs, specifically for white letters. Since then, and doing more research, they have realized that that is not feasible. And so instead they're requesting tonight, and staff is also recommending a condition that all face illuminated white or off-white letters will be set on a dimmer and reviewed by the sign subcommittee in the field prior to building permit final. And again, that would be a condition of approval that staff's recommending. And what that would do is it would address some of the staff's and DRC's concerns with the brightness of face lit white letters. And it would allow the sign subcommittee, as it's written now, would allow the sign subcommittee some control to dim any of those if they felt that it was too bright or too much contrast to the architecture or to neighboring signs. Also, at the request of the DRC, the applicant has added a time restriction, and so the illumination will be turned off between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And I will actually just quickly note that the applicant also looked at the other skyline signs in neighboring jurisdictions, which are what these two photos are on this slide. They do allow facelit letters, and there's obviously varying colors depending on the logo. And so a series of these photos were attached to your packet tonight. So I'll now just go site specific and give you an idea of what each specific site is proposing, starting with California Plaza. So there's a total of 5 sign locations that would be proposed. Again, looking though at only 1 per elevation and a maximum cap per building. And so in this situation, depending on the elevation, signs 1, 2, and 3 would have 46-inch max letter heights, and signs 4 and 5 would have 48-inch max letter heights. Here are some images, some mock-ups of what that would look like. The applicant has also made a little bit more realistic mock-ups for some of the tenants that they're hoping to that would have signage here as a request from the DRC. At the previous study session, you might remember that they had kind of more simplified white or gray letters and no logos were shown. And so this is an attempt to kind of show what actually might be installed at these locations. Mount Diablo Plaza, as I mentioned previously, the site-specific issue with this one was the skyline sign proposed on the stairwell. In response, the applicant is now proposing 2 options. So they've introduced this UW 3.1 location, which is on the adjacent fascia band, as an option for a tenant to have a sign. If a tenant though did want to continue to explore a sign on that stairwell, then the tenant would have an option to install or to consider a location UW 3.2. And under that condition, the sign would have to come to the sign subcommittee for review and approval. The applicant recognizes that this is a unique location, and so they are adding in sign subcommittee approval for any sign at this location, and in no situation would there be a sign at both locations. So an applicant or a tenant would have to pick one or the other. And again, here are some examples. What I've done here is shown a comparison. The top image has the sign at 3.1, which would be on that horizontal fascia band. And then sign 3, or the bottom image is with sign 3.2. So instead, that sign is now on the stairwell. And this is just a different angle, but again, showing the 2 options. So 3.1 on the fascia band and then 3.2 on the stairwell. Moving on to Walnut Creek Center, there are 4 skyline sign locations shown here. And here again are some images of what those would look like. And finally, Ignacio Center. There are several different buildings here, so there are kind of unique fascia band heights depending on the location. So they've shown all scenarios. And here are some examples again of mock-ups. And so I'll just conclude with highlighting some kind of discussion points for tonight. Again, the application before you does require sign ordinance exceptions to install a sign higher than 25 feet above grade, to allow signage for businesses that do not have frontage on the ground floor, and for businesses to exceed 200 square feet of aggregate sign area. As I mentioned before, staff is recommending that the letter heights be reduced to 48 inches or 75% of the fascia band height. Currently it's 85%. And at logo heights be reduced to 54 inches or 85% of the fascia band height instead of 90. And the condition that I previously mentioned, that the white facelit letters be put on a dimmer to be reviewed by the sign subcommittee, and that the applicant has added that second option for the sign on Mount Diablo Plaza, and that any sign on that stairwell enclosure would be required to be approved by the sign subcommittee. I will remind the DRC just of the findings that are required for sign ordinance exceptions, that the placement or the aesthetic objectives of the chapter, meaning the sign ordinance, shall be followed as closely as practical. The intent and purpose of the sign regulation shall be followed as closely as practical, and that the exception may be granted when it can be demonstrated that the signs are necessary to further a public use or public benefit. And so finally, tonight, staff is recommending that the DRC move to adopt the draft resolution and grant final approval of the Skyline Sign Master Sign Program and sign ordinance exceptions, subject to the conditions therein. And I have, again, put the additional condition on the screen here regarding all face illuminated white or off-white lettering shall be set on a dimmer and reviewed by the sign subcommittee in the field prior to the building permit. I am here if you have any questions, and the applicant team and the owners of each property are also here tonight. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Haley. Are there any questions for staff?
I do have a couple.
Go ahead. Speak up. I can't see the screen,
Okay.
so just
Okay.
jump in.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have 3 questions. But it's just a little confusing on my side. I understand the changes and I appreciate what's been done. Question 1, explain to me exactly what the public benefit is of this program and this change to the ordinance.
Yep. So at the last study session, we went into more detail, and I apologize I didn't
Yeah, confused.
tonight. But so the property owners, the 4 property owners, approached the city sometime last year with some data and some concerns that they have increasing office vacancies at their locations, and especially in comparison to neighboring jurisdictions near the Pleasant Hill BART station and Concord, where they are noticing that the restrictions on the signage and the inability to have visibility from the freeway and from BART is really hindering their ability to lease out their tenant spaces. And so this is really kind of an economic development, and also a planning kind of joint effort. And looking at that data and looking at what is allowed in other neighboring jurisdictions, staff and the applicant have kind of come together to find hopefully a solution that would fit Walnut Creek, but also would allow and address some of these vacancy issues.
Okay, and in the first meeting we had, there was a discussion that basically the lease rates are higher on these buildings than other buildings in the area, correct?
I think some of the data did look at lease rates, and the areas in Walnut Creek were a little bit higher than others. But I do know they also cited signage was another concern.
That does sound to me like a private benefit, not a public benefit. I'm still struggling with that. But I'll move on to my next question. The second, in the findings under number 1, it says that the project maintains and enhances high quality building design and urban design. How is it enhancing the building design and urban environment?
So I think when staff looks at, and you're talking about the findings specifically for exceptions.
Yes.
That essentially when we look at the buildings and we look at the architecture, those very kind of prominent horizontal fascia bands that every building, that kind of consistent architecture across all these sites really lends itself well to signage. Mm-hmm. And putting signage on there is really compatible with the architecture. Mm-hmm. And so that is kind of staff's position in that it does complement that building architecture nicely.
Okay. Third, last question. It says that they are warranted to address vacancy rate in the area and allow businesses to effectively compete with other offices in the central Contra Costa area. What is going to stop the other dozen or so buildings in town that are also struggling to rent out their buildings not to come back to the exact same conclusion and say, we need 48-inch tall signs on our buildings in order to, some of which we've denied in the past, and they will say that they cannot effectively compete with other office buildings. How are we going to control that in the future?
And I'll actually go back. So staff really worked with the applicant and focused on some very unique features of these 4 sites that, not to say that there is not any other building in Walnut Creek that would meet these, but there are very few, if there are, that these sites specifically, they are adjacent to the Walnut Creek BART station and have visibility from the tracks, and also 680. And they are adjacent to freeway exits. And so these signs from the freeway would provide direct wayfinding, and that they're all located north of Ignacio Valley Road. Everything south of Ignacio Valley Road does have much more of a pedestrian oriented kind of downtown feel, and where they would benefit more from pedestrian oriented signage mounted lower to the building. And that all of these buildings are, they're tall, multi-story, 5, 6, and higher story buildings with these unique horizontal fascia bands that I mentioned. And so looking at all these unique features, staff is confident that these sites are unique in that, and that, not every building or majority of the buildings in Walnut Creek would not share these unique features and would not make them candidates for skyline signs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Haley? Haley, I just have one, just looking at the slide that you have up there, and maybe to clarify, the 4th one down, you have a tall multi-story building. Well, that's not very descriptive. Any building in Walnut Creek could be considered tall, and it has more than 1 story. So is it possible to say over 80 feet or more than 7 stories? Would that apply to just these buildings?
That's a good point. And it would apply to majority of them. I do not know if it would apply to every single location proposed. There might be a few where they are under, let's say, a 7-story. I can double check that, but it would apply kind of holistically to the sites in general.
Right, and getting back to Joseph's point, it probably would apply to most buildings in town too. So if we're going to keep this very unique, I think we need to be as specific as possible. All right, if there's no other questions, again, I can't see the screen of everybody, so you need to speak up if you have a question for Haley. If not, we'll open it up to the applicant. Okay, hearing none of the applicants here, if they'd like to introduce themselves and whatever presentation you'd like to show us.
Sure, I'll start. Hi, I'm Jason Chorchi with Line Real Estate. I represent the ownership of both Walnut Creek Center and Cal Plaza. I want to start off by thanking you guys for your time. We had a long meeting a few months ago. I think we took a lot of your input to heart and addressed it as Haley kind of walked through. And this was a collaborative effort, both with Haley and the team, as well as the other owners of this little block. With that, I'm going to introduce Ted to kind of take control with Ross Lutheran and start the presentation.
Yeah, thank you all for kind of regrouping here to go back through this. As Jason mentioned, this is a result of a collaborative effort, not only a number of owners coming together who are often competitors in the marketplace, but also working with the city staff and this commission to come to where we are today. Just like to respond to one of the questions that was posed earlier, and that was, what is a public benefit here? And I think the public benefit is employment, is good paying jobs in the core of your city. And if you're losing good paying jobs to your neighboring communities, that means that your residents have to commute and that your local businesses and shops suffer. So I think there is a huge public benefit in these buildings being fully occupied, because when they're fully occupied, those are high salary, high wage jobs that are going to benefit your community. So I think that is the public benefit of good employers moving into these buildings. At our previous meeting, there were a number of issues brought up, and I think we've done everything we can do to respond to those. One of them was just asking for colorful examples, and we responded by showing colored logos on all the buildings just to give you an idea of what these things might look like. Another concern was white lighting. And there were concerns about white reading brighter than other signs. So we've always kind of known this. You've obviously known it. You've crossed this path before. And so we did some research, and it turns out, yes, white signs do emit more light, and there's data to back it up. They do emit more light than colored signs do. And so originally, as Haley mentioned, we thought we had a criteria by which we could certify signs at a certain lighting level. And we polled a number of large manufacturers of these types of signs, channel letters, and none of them was able to certify these easily. So we didn't want to have a guideline approved that would be difficult for tenants to meet and for the city to enforce. So that's why we had to kind of back away from that set limit and instead propose that we install dimmers in any white-faced signs. So hopefully that will meet with your approval. One of the other issues was the big tower element at Mount Diablo Plaza. There was some concern over what that might look like. A number of members said, you know, I wouldn't mind something really kind of creative and good to happen there. And so we thought about that. And as Haley mentioned, what we did is we said, let's make that an optional location. But if you want to pursue that location, let's bring it back to your signage subcommittee and let them have some input on it. And hopefully that will encourage a tenant, if they do want to take on that location, to do something really nice that the city will be proud of. So we wrote that into our guidelines. And then the other thing was there was a question about timing of lights, and we have timers that are going to go on. I believe it's 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., which we thought was reasonable. Most of these businesses aren't, you know, trying to attract business in the middle of the night. So we thought that was pretty reasonable. But we tried to respond to all of the comments and respond in a way that hopefully will earn your confidence and move us forward. So I think Haley did such a phenomenal job of describing the package. I don't think I need to walk you through it. There's nothing else to really show you. So we're just available here to answer any question.
All right, great. Was there anybody else in your team that was going to speak, or is it just you and Jason?
I think it was just myself and Jason.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's bring it back to the commission for questions. Does anybody have questions of the applicant?
I have a question that may just be general, but I think it's maybe relevant for the applicant to answer. So I appreciate that we've put in some opportunities for the sign subcommittee to weigh in, but I do want to ask, I know that we review it for adherence to our ordinance, but is there an opportunity to say it's just horrendous and we don't like how it contributes to the skyline? You know, I mean, I don't mean to be blunt, but being as there's this artful opportunity, because I'm the one who kind of threw that in the ring, and I don't know that that's where it would go, but I just want to understand, like, what's that process? Because are they only able to say it meets all these regulations which we've put in place, or is there an opportunity to be like, that's not appropriate for our community?
That might be something Haley can answer better than I can in terms of how that signage subcommittee works. But my thought is that it's something that maybe there's design guidelines that apply to that, but it seems like that's something that's going to have some sort of subjective review to.
Okay.
Is that true, Haley?
Yeah, so I can, so we do have the sign ordinance, which has, you know, sets obviously the standards for signs. And then we do have our design guidelines where there's a section on signs. And so the sign subcommittee would have, you know, kind of leadway in working with the applicant to get something that they felt was appropriate. And so it's not just about size, you know, there is a little bit more subjectivity there. I will say that our sign guidelines, design guidelines, have some that address skyline signs, but not many. And so it would really be up to the sign subcommittee to also have a discussion with the applicant on what they thought was appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah. And our hope is that just by labeling this one particular location as the alternate optional that has to go through the special process, that's going to signal a tenant that you can't bring something garish because it's going to be a non-starter. So we're hoping that sends that signal.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Charles.
Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, so the question for the applicant is, would you be opposed to the following? So I brought this up at the study session. and just a little bit of context. And it gets to be similar to this one sign that Commissioner Case was talking about. We don't have a new sign guidelines program that really applies to the skyline signs. This is a new thing. And these 4 buildings or properties would be first, and yet there will be no overarching skyline signage design requirements. Because when I look at the way you have it set up in the master sign program, once we approve this, if we approve it, with the exception of that one stairwell sign, it's really up to the property owners and managers to approve the signs that are going up. And these are going to be large, prominent signs. So my question is, would the applicants be opposed to a sign subcommittee? So not a full public hearing process, but either sign subcommittee or somebody in city staff being in the approval loop on each sign. Because otherwise what I'm afraid of is, you know, that intercom example sign looks great. But then let's say down the road that tenant leaves and, you know, somebody else comes in, the building owner could approve any sign and the city would have no say. And so what I'm afraid of is, because this whole process is about giving the property owners an exception to the sign ordinance, as opposed to the city has come up with this full new set of guidelines. I would prefer and hope you wouldn't object to some level of sign subcommittee or the right people on city staff being a part of the approval of each sign, so that we really can say the city will help prevent any given sign going up from being something that we all look at and regret.
Yeah, I think one of the goals of having this master sign or these master sign programs in place is so that the owners of these properties can enter into negotiations with prospective tenants with confidence in what their signage entitlements might be. And signage is always a huge component of a lease. And so one of the goals of this is to have something that says, here it is, here's what a tenant can expect to put on a building without going through another somewhat onerous process. So on one hand, I understand that goal. On the other hand, that sort of defeats the purpose of really what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is be able to speak with confidence to prospective tenants and employers about what their entitlement is to signage.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think hopefully there's some balance between, because if we approve this, you're going to be able to guarantee the prospective tenants, yep, you can have a skyline sign.
Yep.
No problem. But the city would like to make sure that, you know, some, forgive the word, some hideous looking sign doesn't go up in a prominent building in the city.
Yeah.
So
now one thing, I sent you some examples from neighboring jurisdictions of most of the skylines signs I could find. I actually went hunting. I went hunting throughout the Bay Area, and I went down to LA, and on Google, I'm just, having a great time trying to find a hideous skyline sign. And for the most part, they don't exist. There aren't any really, really obviously bad ones. There are, in LA, there's, the top of an entire building that's covered in LEDs that someone might object to. But in general, skyline signs, they kind of are what they are. They're, somebody's logo. It's usually a nicely designed logo because it's usually a larger, reputable company. So it's usually a well-designed thing that goes onto a nice building that they're proud of. Even right up the road, you have, Del Monte Foods is up there. And normally you'd think, oh, it's going to be a giant tomato or something. And you look at it and you go, oh, that's a pretty nice skyline sign. It's their logo, and it looks, very tailored and corporate and elegant. And it's Del Monte Foods. So I tried to find a horrible example and I really couldn't. So there you go.
Commissioner Carling, if I could just jump in, yeah, staff would not be devoid of future involvement with any signs. Any tenant that wants to come in for a Skyline sign under this program is required to come down to City Hall and get a sign permit, a sign application permit, and as a building permit as well. So staff will be looking at every one of the signs that are proposed to be installed to ensure that it meets the parameters of the sign program. So although we can't put in a condition that says no hideous signs shall be installed, that's why we have sign programs. We're hoping to get all the parameters set up so that everyone understands going forward what the potential is for signage. That includes proportionality. It includes maximum letter heights. It includes face colorings, illumination, all of those aspects. Currently, right now, the only parameter that we have in writing is under the design guidelines for when it talks about Skyline signs. Those should be halo illuminated. Those are the only guidelines that we've got currently, and so the applicant is requesting that we even allow facelit signs as well. So anything that the commission wants to put in as a parameter here, we can do that. Staff is just recommending that the one sign on the stairwell it be subject to sign subcommittee review. And then I'm sure we could set that up such that if there was disagreement at the sign subcommittee level, we could bring that to the full commission for further review. So we could do that too.
Okay. And Charles, I think hideous was outlawed in Walnut Creek in 1978. So.
Okay, so back to Ken then. Are you comfortable with the way this would be set up in the current proposal? Would the city staff have enough input? The way it's set up with primarily the owner managers approving the individual signs as they change over time, that the city has enough influence to make sure that things are going the way we would like?
Well, I think so. I think staff is supportive of what's proposed. I think we've got parameters on proportionality of the sign on the fascia. We've got maximum letter heights. We've got an allowance, a free allowance of coloring. The only thing is that we wanted to get the DRC's feedback on internally illuminated white face signs and whether or not it would be appropriate to have those looked at. They would be on a dimmer switch, LED on a dimmer switch, and then looked at by the sign subcommittee after installation, if they're white, or possibly even off-white. So we're going to leave that up to the commission, but we think there's enough parameters in the program as proposed that we're comfortable with that going forward.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Joseph, Carlos, do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Carlos?
I have no questions, but I do have comments. I'll wait
Okay,
for that.
I have a couple of questions. Are the signs, are the tenants already in there to where, do you have some inkling of where these signs are going or what elevations that they're going on, or is this completely open at this point?
Jason, do you have tenants that are interested in signs right this second?
Sure. At the current time, they're inklings. I think there's tenants that we have that we're talking to that have interest in building top signage, but no deal at Walnut Creek Center or Cal Plaza has been made for a sign. we've waited
Okay.
for
And then if we were to eliminate one building, for example, out of the Ignacio Center, that's your attachment 7. And within that, you're showing 4 buildings. What would happen if one of those buildings was eliminated from the sign program? Does that make or break the deal?
to respect of Heinz, who owns that project, and Haley's kind of feedback. To their credit, they had signs that faced kind of Main and Locust, and to try to stick with this ordinance of having all the projects be BART facing or freeway facing, they eliminated those signs. And the only signs that they have the application to do are those that face the BART, which I think was responsive to staff's comments.
Okay, my question is on this sign application, for example, in the Ignacio Center, if one of the buildings we felt didn't fit their criteria and no signs were allowed on that one building within that group, how does that affect the, I mean, other than obviously not having those 2 or 3 signs?
I would say if you want to propose that, you're welcome to. Chris just logged in, so he represents Heinz. So
yeah, hi, good evening. You know, we view it, while it's 3 separate buildings, well, while it's one project, it is 3 separate buildings, and you know, they each have their own identity, they each have their own tenant base, and they, you know, they're each, in our opinion, deserving of their own applicable signage. We believe we've adhered to staff's comments as far as the placement of those signs, and so our position is we think it's only fair to allow all of those tenants to have an opportunity to get their name out there and to continue to recruit and maintain their tenant base in Walnut Creek.
Okay, but when we talk fair, again, I'm basing it against the criteria the city's trying to establish, whether you have frontage on 680 or the BART. And for example, the just what I'm specifically looking at is the UW sign number 4 and UW sign number 7 on the Ignacio Center as an example. I don't think that should be in the sign program. That is not visible from the freeway. That's basically a sign that you're really advertising on the streets of Walnut Creek. So I would propose that those signs be eliminated. It doesn't fit the criteria of what this program is trying to do, a high skyline sign going towards 680.
Which 2, Brian?
Well, in this particular slide, it would be, or is this the right slide? It would be the number 4. Oh, that's a different animal, but number 7 and 10. And my rationale, I'm kind of getting into comments, but I wanted the applicant to look at this now. I think 7 and 10 don't adhere to the sign program as they're putting together. It has no relationship really to BART or the freeway. They're not visible. And sign number 4, again, all that's doing is advertising down to Walnut Creek along California Boulevard. Again, that does not fit within this criteria of freeway signage or BART. So I would like to suggest that those be eliminated as part of this package. And I have other examples too, but I'll get into that in my comment. But I wanted the applicant to say, if that were to happen, does that kill the deal or what happens?
Ted, are you able to show the view from BART, more of the street level view? Because I believe we've addressed a lot of staff's comments relative to this, and our feeling is it does not only the visibility from 680 but from BART as well.
Yeah, so UW 7 is shown here on the screen now. It is visible from both 680 and the BART platform. UW 10 we couldn't get a shot from the BART platform, but UW 10 is visible from BART, just because I couldn't get up on the BART tracks and take the picture. UW 4 I think is the one that maybe if we zoomed out might be slightly questionable, whether it's visible from BART
Okay.
here.
But again, my question is, say it went down and we have agreement, you know, that those signs are eliminated. Again, that's just a deletion in your sign program, or does that kill the whole program? That's what I'm trying to get at. What?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of up to this commission to how you want to, you know, structure an approval or a conditioned approval, or, you know, what your response is.
Okay.
I think UW7 and UW10 are definitely pretty important, especially since those are the only signs on that building. I don't necessarily want to speak for Chris, but, you know, UW4, I think you may have a point. That one may not have an audience to BART or the freeway.
Okay. Then my last question is, again, this too, to be fair to the rest of the town's sign programs, you're really busting the limits of this 200 square feet per building. And so again, trying to make it more equitable, because we have even recently turned down signs that, you know, that are requesting maybe an extra 45 feet or whatever above the 200 square feet. So is there any give back? I mean, are there some monument signs that perhaps if this goes forward and you're allowed 600 additional square feet, that maybe there's a monument sign or something that is taken away, again, in the sense of fairness, shall we say, to all the other businesses in Walnut Creek that are limited to 200 square feet?
Again, that might be a provision you could add. I will say that in most jurisdictions, skyline signs are above and beyond the typical square footage allowed by the sign code. And I think the reason for that, the thinking behind that, is that these are large scale companies. They're large employers. They're usually occupying tens, if not hundreds of thousands of square feet of space. And they get some special consideration for signage. And so in most jurisdictions, skyline signs are not included in the calculation, because the calculation is usually based on frontage and it's usually an individual business. So they're typically excluded from that. It's not unusual, and it's not unusual for skyline signs to be 200 to 250 square feet. You know, in San Jose, their building is 500 square feet. It's 250 feet on a side. I think in Pleasant Hill, it's not too different.
And if, say, the skyline sign is XYZ Lawyers, if their name is already on a monument sign down below, would there be some language? Are you trying to get someone else's identity up there, or would we be repeating somebody that already has signage down below?
I think it could go either way. I think that's at the landlord's discretion. So if the landlord has, you know, XYZ attorneys that are taking 3/4 of their building and they say, yeah, you can have 2 skyline signs and a monument sign, it's kind of up to them. And if they say, no, we're more segmented than that, and we need to sort of divvy out that entitlement to get some tenants to fill in some gaps that we need, I think that's at the landlord's discretion. And
Okay.
you know, in a lot of cases, they're kind of two different animals. One's going to be seen from BART and a freeway. One's going to be seen from Ignacio or California. They're kind of different things. They're seldom going to be seen at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, are there any other questions of the applicant before I open it up to the public?
Yeah, Chair Kelly, if I could just clarify a couple things. The 200 square foot limit is per business, not per building. So keep that in mind. The other thing is that we will be seeing this commission will be seeing a master sign program for this campus that involves all of the ground floor tenants, monument signs, and so forth. So that will be forthcoming. As I recall, none of the monument signs have individual tenants listed on any of those, nor do they have any existing at that site either. So keep that in mind. And there was something else I can't remember, but
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I have one quick question when you get a chance.
All right, go ahead, Joseph.
Just out of curiosity, if somebody who's in the building now then decided they want to have a skyline sign, would you charge them extra for rent because they got one? Or would it be a thing to keep them?
Probably depends on whether they're renegotiating their lease soon.
Okay. All right, just have to ask.
Jason, you can answer that.
I mean, I think the short answer is it would be a negotiation. Our hope would be to attract new tenants to the market, given where our occupancy levels are.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll also, what the sign ordinance reads now is that only ground floor tenants are allowed signage. So the master sign program that's coming in will address ground floor tenant signage on the building. But there, according to the sign ordinance, there should be no signage allowed even on monument signs for tenants above the first floor level, if that makes sense. Unless they come in for exceptions again.
Okay. Okay, again, last call for questions before I open it up to the public. Okay, hearing none. If the public would like to make a comment or ask questions, and again, if I can find my sheet, if you'd like to participate, the web ID is 969-0171-9122, and the password is 478525. The phone number is 1-669-900-6833.
We're not seeing any, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Just give it a couple more seconds before I close it. Okay, hearing or seeing none, let's close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for our comments. Would anybody like to start?
Pick someone.
I'm going to start more for, I want to continue. I drove around the buildings today, just trying to find out exactly how it fits. And I guess my goal was, I do believe we're opening Pandora's box here. And, you know, if you're driving down the freeway, either direction from about Red Gear up through toward Pleasant Hill, there's a whole slew of buildings, you know, that kind of fit this equation. And it's not just one or two. I mean, there's everything along Oakland Boulevard, you know, Kaiser Hospital, the Marriott hotels, and it goes on. And even stepping back a couple blocks, a lot of these buildings are very visible. So in my opinion, to move this forward, I would like it to be very specific, you know, to where we are finding findings and we can, you know, we have reason to not allow someone else to do it. It's on fairly, you know, solid ground. So with that in mind, I was going around and as an example, I'm going to run through them, but on attachment 7, the Ignacio Center, I did not find that the signs number 4, 7, and 10 adhered to this program. They were more just because the buildings happen to be in the group and they can put a sign to the signs, but in some of these cases, they're blocked by trees. They only front on North Main Street, or in the case of sign number 4, it's just a high sign that goes all the way down California to Walnut Creek, and it has no bearing at all on the freeway or BART. So I would like to suggest that those particular signs not be allowed. And moving on, I'll kind of go quickly on attachment 6, the Walnut Creek Center. The same thing, sign number 1 and 5, I think don't apply. And my rationale for that is the sign number 1 or 5 is their screen, there's a grouping of redwood trees. So they're blocked anyway by the freeway. And the other one, there's been an apartment building that's been built up since that's not shown on the exhibit. So that sign would just be facing the apartment and it's not visible to the freeway. So again, I don't think that applies. I'm okay with the California Plaza. And under attachment number 5, the Mount Diablo Plaza, sign number 1, that's the one, excuse me, that's the one where there's an apartment that's now been built directly in front of it that blocks it from the freeway. So there's no reason for that sign to go. And I'm opposed to the sign 3.2, that would be the billboard sign on the tower.
Mhm.
I think we should just eliminate that. So I wanted to throw that out as my comments, that if we reduce this down to really fit what they're trying to do, I think I'm okay with it. I could go with that with the other restrictions, but I'm not okay with just saying, let's put a sign on every elevation because it's within this group, because it doesn't fit these strict requirements. And I'm trying to keep these findings as tight as possible because it is going to be Pandora's box we're opening up. So that's my comment right now for the commission. So if anybody else would like to pick up on it or different opinions,
I'll go.
or whatever.
I'll go. I do think that the applicant's done a good job of responding to some of the things that were questioned by the commission last time. And I think that the restrictions that are being put on the project, whether it's time that the buildings can be lit and some dimming of white letters, and basically the number of signs that are allowable on each building, are all good. However, that doesn't change me from my initial feeling. I really struggled with this for a while. As I look at the picture that was behind Haley in her presentation, to look down from the hills and see signage like that on the buildings lit just doesn't work for me. Many cities I see don't have any skyline signs. The background that Chris had in San Francisco had, I think, none that you could see. Most people drive through the city, and I agree. San Jose has quite a few of them. The Adobe building stands out as the one I noticed the most. I don't really consider it, I consider it advertising, not wayfinding for me. I think in this case, it's advertising on the top of the buildings. And I've never been in favor of this my whole time on the design review. And I think that the current rules that sort of restrict it to certain people and having each sign have to come through design review makes sense to me. We've always had that. It's really not a new rule. We've resisted billboards in this town and other things. And I think that the understanding that 5 to 6 story buildings are the only ones that allow it is almost even worse. And again, I agree with Brian, it's going to open up a Pandora's box. That's been my concern from the beginning. I would have been okay maybe with something like the building name or some other identification, but this kind of sign, I think there's other reasons to be in Walnut Creek other than having a sign on the building, and the high rents kind of tell you that. And so essentially I'm not in favor of this and continue not to be in favor of it.
All right, Charles, Casey, or Carlos?
I can
Well,
go.
I have nothing against the signs. I feel that the signs are the way they are being designed in relationship with the buildings and the fascias. I think they are a good fit. I'm definitely against the billboard sign. I think there shouldn't be any sign there. I think it's a good fit for the building. And if I go by the rationale of bringing tenants and pushing the tenancy of these buildings, I'm all for that. The only thing after this is I would like to get some lessons learned and see if it's effective or if it was not effective in bringing the tenants and in bringing the people that you thought you were going to be bringing with the signs. But I take no exceptions to the signs.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Charles. So I am overall in favor of the program. And I think that's consistent with where I've been since we've been talking about these. I think one thing that we should keep in mind, one part of our charter as design review is economic viability / vitality of the designs. That is somewhere within the DRC's charter document, for lack of knowing the precise term, but I have read that, and I think we've talked about it before. I think it's important if the skyline signs will either keep existing tenants or attract new tenants. I think that's extraordinarily valuable to the residents of Walnut Creek. I think, to me, that's the public benefit, is either keeping top-notch companies, employers here, or getting new ones in, minimizing the level of vacancies in these, Class A buildings in Walnut Creek is important. So I'm in favor of that. I spoke earlier, I personally would like to see an ability for a little more review of each individual sign, but I also understand and respect the other opinions heard on that. So I can be flexible about that. I do think Chair Killian brings up something worth consideration and important, which is if we do have a sign that's not predominantly going to face BART or the freeway, which is the main tenet of this master sign program, I think those individual sign locations should be evaluated as to that criteria. And I think, and I thank you, Chair Killian, for noting the apartment. So if we have an apartment that's up against one of these office buildings, or another building up against one of these office buildings, and the sign will only be partially viewable from the freeway or BART, and it's mainly just going to sit there and be something that residential units look at or get the light even up till 10 o'clock at night, that wouldn't make sense, unless even with something like an apartment abutting the property, that you could still look and go, you know what, that sign is still predominantly visible from BART or from the freeway. Then I think you could still make the argument that sign should be there. So I am in favor of, I haven't picked out specific signs as Chair Killian has, but I think it might merit just going back and looking at the ones that he has mentioned and really, do they meet the proposed use that we're talking about? But overall, I continue to favor going with the Skyline program. I think it's a valuable incentive for the tenants and for the property owners in the city.
Okay, great. Casey?
So I also support it. I am not offended by the signs. I even like the opportunity that comes out potentially of the stairwell one. And I think there's some artful opportunity here that may not be what we see. But I do find signage to be a wayfinding element for me. And I think it helps distinguish one building from another. So.
Okay, let's see if we can craft something to move this forward or not. Let's start this way. The billboard sign, that seems to be, can we get a consensus on whether that should be allowed, not allowed, or under further review? Do we have any consensus on that?
This is Commissioner Krelling. I'm with Commissioner Case on done properly. I think it could be something interesting and unique, and with the condition that sign subcommittee has to review and approve it, I would support it.
Okay, I'm with Carlos. I'm against it. So Joseph, maybe you're the tiebreaker.
I'm against it.
Item.
Yeah, it doesn't belong in this building.
Nope, I agree. No.
Okay. So let's
If
table
it
that.
was some kind of a logo for the building, artistically done, maybe, but as just advertising for a tenant, no.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So right now, 3 against 2 for. Are we okay with staff's conditions if this goes forward with the lighting being turned off at 10, between 10 and 7? Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And are we okay with the dimmer of the white light being on a dimmer, and the city reviews each one that comes through is white? Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Good thing. Yes.
So,
Okay.
I get the dimmer though. I get to control it.
Chair Killian, did you want to consider off-white at all?
Hmm? I prefer
Uh,
white. White,
As opposed to not allowing white, or just off white being another color?
Another color to look at by the sign
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Tough.
I don't know why that would be any different than if we're allowing colored. That's just a color, unless we're saying a bright white isn't allowed and it's got to be an off-white. Is that what you're kind of suggesting?
I'm just thinking off-white may come across very white at night too. So if you wanted to consider that.
Oh, as being part of the dimmer?
Right.
Okay. I'm willing to consider that. Is the rest of the commission okay with that?
Yeah, that's a tough definition, so I would have to say, if so, yes.
Yes.
can we
Okay.
go back, Chair? Just, is there any different feeling on the stairwell sign, given, I think Commissioner Gorney said, maybe if it was a building logo, but not a tenant's logo? Does that change the mix?
Not for me, it doesn't. You know, in this sign program, we're talking about, you know, horizontal signs and everything, and where that is, you know, up there, I just don't think it fits as a sign platform, is my own opinion.
Thank
I
you.
agree with that.
Owner would have the opportunity, if they wanted to do something, to come in on a separate application, correct?
Yeah, we're not prohibiting unless we put a condition in there saying no signs allowed, I guess, on the
Yeah.
stairwell.
Right.
Okay. All right, let's move on to then my concern. Is there any support that we either maybe have staff or a sign review go around each specific site? I think I could make a compelling argument that there's probably about 6 or 7 signs that don't fit within this criteria of being there for the freeway and BART, and therefore should not be included in this. And maybe each commissioner wants to view it themselves, and they may not agree with the exact numbers that I have. But the context of that condition, do I have any support for that?
I think, being that you said that there wouldn't be more, they said that there wouldn't be more than like 3 signs per building, I believe it was, to eliminate a couple of those locations doesn't really restrict it that much. So I would be in favor.
Yeah, and I support not having signs where it's not predominantly viewable from the freeway or BART.
Okay. So to move this forward, then that condition, we'll have to iron it out maybe with staff on how that language is to get it to the final product. Other than that, I think we're back then to the overall sign program. We have Joseph against it, and the others, it appears to me from what I'm hearing, all at various stages of acceptance. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. So have I missed anything? Because with that, I'm going to try to craft a motion, but would there anybody else like to say something, or have I missed something on some element that someone brought up that hasn't been addressed?
I think you got it.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we might look at each of the packages and decide up front which signs would be appropriate and which locations would not, rather than after approval relying on staff to figure out which ones were facing the freeway and BART and which ones were not. Would that make sense?
It could, if they want to rely on my field trips. I was thinking, maybe whether the actual resolution could be delayed a week or so to give the other commissioners time to look if they've had different views than mine. I'm willing to go with what I saw because I'm already comfortable with what I think shouldn't be in this, but I'm trying to give the commissioners, if they have other input.
I looked at the like 3 or 4 that you just mentioned in the packages and understand why you came to that conclusion, but without going to the field and seeing it exactly. So at this point, I would be okay accepting what you went out and did on a field trip, unless we kicked it to the science subcommittee to go do another field trip and put it on consent next time.
I would think it's fair with the proponent that us, the commissioners, go and have a second look, like you suggested, Brian.
Okay, well, can we do this? Put together the motion, whatever it is, and then table it for 1 week to allow the commissioners, if they want to go out there, and then can we come back? Is that legal, so to speak? And if they want to change it, how does that work?
No, I think you're talking about continuing this item until the next meeting, while you make that determination amongst yourselves. Wouldn't be appropriate to make a motion and then some kind of a condition. That would not be appropriate. So we would have to continue this item, which we could do.
Okay.
It's important enough that I'm okay with that.
Okay. Are the rest of the commissioners comfortable with that?
Sure.
I am.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion then that we continue this to the next available meeting with the understanding that commissioners will go out and look at the individual signs to determine whether they fit within the specific criteria of the Skyline Sign Master Program. And then hopefully we can come back and make a motion. So my motion is for continuance. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Did you understand all that, Carlos? That was
I
kind of
did. I got
wordy.
a summary.
Okay. All right. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yeah, just wanted to ask if there's any discussion on that motion, and then I would also just mention that of course we could not go out as a group and look at the various signs and so locations. We would expect each commissioner to do that individually if we go forward.
Okay. And I will, maybe after this motion is done, I will again repeat the signs that I feel do not apply, and then so the commissioners can have that when they go out individually and then make their own determination.
You do that before you finish the motion?
Yeah, I think we've finished it and we have a second.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, if there's no more discussion, I'll take the roll. Chair Killian,
Yes.
Commissioner Valia,
Yes.
Commissioner Case,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorney,
Yes.
and Commissioner Crowley.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We will continue that. We will see what we can do about getting that on the next meeting. But let's go ahead and I'm trying to think whether we can do that on a date certain. Let me check the schedule here, please. Hang on.
While you're checking that, I'm going to give the specific signs that I've gone out to. I'm going to start with attachment number 4, which is California Plaza. I was okay with that. I did not have any signs that I wanted to eliminate. On attachment number 5, which is the Mount Diablo Plaza, I was not in favor of signs number 1 and the 3.2, which was the stairwell sign. On attachment number 6, which is the Walnut Creek Center, I'm not in favor of sign number 1 and sign number 5. And on attachment number 7, which is the Ignacio Center, I'm not in favor of sign number 4, 7, and 10.
Can you restate the attachment 6 ones?
Attachment 6 was sign number 1 and number 5.
Okay, thank you.
And those were it. All right.
Thank you.
Do we have a date certain or anything, Ken, or?
Unless you request a date certain, we will get that on as soon as we can put that together and have that for you.
Okay. Okay, we'll just rely on you to figure out the best way then.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to item number 5, commission considerations.
Nothing from staff.
Okay, item number 6, commission member and staff reports or announcements. Do we have any commission member announcements?
Nothing from me.
Okay,
For me.
Nothing for me.
okay, any staff reports?
Nothing from staff. No, I think we're good. We're looking at, I'm just looking at the schedule. I'll just mention October 21, there are no items scheduled for that meeting currently. And we've got, boy, it's looking very sparse on November 4th as well. I'll just mention that. So not a whole lot coming forward, but there should be down the road.
Okay,
Can I ask a quick question on this item we just talked about with these signs? Is it expected that we'll get our information back and the applicant is going to redo all this paperwork that we have here? Or are we all assuming we're going to use this paperwork for the next meeting? I hate to have to print all this again.
Oh, yeah, if that's a concern, we can certainly use this paperwork and then just as conditions in a resolution, identify those signs that the locations that would not be appropriate, and we can certainly cross those off the approved set.
Okay, I just want to make sure they don't have to reprint for the next meeting.
So the cadence of that matter will be, we're all going to go out individually, make our determination of which signs we think don't fit. We're going to come back, we're all going to announce it, and then we're going to have to somehow negotiate a final solution between the 5 of us, right?
it'll be fun, Charles.
I like this kind of stuff. This is
Negotiation.
making it more interesting.
That's what it sounds like, yeah. Or maybe we could all relate to staff and staff could correlate all the numbers and see if there's a consensus beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and we'll certainly allow the applicant to chime in if you'd like.
Mhm.
The public hearing was closed and it was continued, but we can certainly allow that and see if there are any questions, comments from them. I'll also mention that whatever decision this commission makes is appealable to the planning commission. So.
Okay.
And can I just ask that I'm most certain, because I didn't, somebody on staff probably took notes of the signs from Brian, maybe shoot an email out to the commissioners. Is that allowable?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
You weren't listening to me, Charles?
I was listening and looking, and then I was looking for my pen to circle them and was coming up empty.
Okay. All right, with that, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.